There are stories of a tall, thin, faceless creature who lurks around forests and abandoned sites looking for children to abduct with his long, extendable tentacles. A creature who may have just made the jump from internet legend to real-world entity. Today, we explore the strangeness of Slender Man. Welcome back to another episode of Down with the Strangeness, the show where every single week we dive into another piece of strangeness. I am your host, Ben, and I am excited to be back for another episode. This is the second episode of October. Last week we covered a real-life scary story of the Broadus family and the Watcher house. I hope you all enjoyed that episode. If you did, it would mean a lot for you to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Like and subscribe on YouTube or follow the show on Spotify depending on how you listen. And even if you didn't enjoy it, that's okay. You can always email me with feedback, suggestions, or anything really at downwiththestrangeness@gmail.com. Now, while last week we covered a story that took place purely in the real world, it's time to lean a little further into the spookiness. Today, we're talking about something that kind of blurs the lines between the real world and the supernatural. We are talking about Slender Man. While there are slight variations in the accounts of the appearance of Slender Man, he is commonly seen and described as a thin, unusually tall, human-like creature with a smooth, featureless face that wears a black or dark suit and tie. He is said to be able to extend his already long arms, as well as tentacles that come out of his back. Slender Man sightings most commonly occur on the edge of or within forests, near semi-secluded playgrounds or other abandoned locations. Typically, the Slender Man will stalk, torment, and abduct people, primarily children. And it is said that if you're within a certain proximity of the Slender Man, then you will experience what is known as Slender Sickness. This sickness quickly brings on anxiety and paranoia, as well as nightmares and delusions. It is even reported that some experience nosebleeds along with these other symptoms. And Slender Man can even allegedly interfere with video and audio components, which make it difficult to capture a decent image or video of him, or to obviously radio if you're out in one of these secluded forests. They even claim that investigating and researching the Slender Man puts you at a higher risk of triggering his presence in your life. And with the amount of research that I did for this episode, I hope that those people are wrong. And so that's some pretty scary stuff. And when you look at some of the pictures and some videos that do exist online of Slender Man, that's even scarier. But unlike a lot of monsters and creatures and other supernatural entities that haunt the collective consciousness of society, Slender Man's origin is not necessarily ancient or ultra mysterious like a Bigfoot or a Loch Ness monster. It doesn't have that kind of depth, because no, the origin of Slender Man can be traced back to a very specific point in time, a very specific person, a very specific place, the wonderful world of the internet. Slender Man can be traced back to a post on the site Something Awful, which is kind of like it's an internet forum. It's a little bit like Reddit, but people will share articles and different news sources there, and it tends to have a certain edge to it that is not what you would expect on mainstream or even what you get on Facebook. But on June 10th, 2009, Eric Knudsen, or Knudsen, I'm not positive, going by the name Victor Surge, the username Victor Surge on Something Awful, Eric responded to a request at a contest for digitally altered photographs that would then be used to create new mythologies around the characters and stories around the photographs. If you're familiar with the term creepypasta, that is essentially what this is. It's the earlier days of creepypasta, and it's just something that kind of gained popularity early and quickly on the internet, something that's still very popular today. So Knudsen posted 2 images, one of a group of what appeared to be teenagers, and the other of some younger children playing on a playground. Both images with the thin, tall, faceless creature lurking in the background. Knudsen even provided some brief captions to help guide the origin of Slender Man by providing minimal and vague context for some of the images, as well as some captions that are pretty cryptic and steer you in a very specific direction for this character, right? And the Slender Man character was very popular. It grew quickly off of this one post, right, in these images, and other users began creating several more stories and more images posted within days of the original post. Only 10 days after the creation of Slender Man on Something Awful, Slender Man would make his first jump towards reality when he was the subject of a YouTube series called Marble Hornets. Marble Hornets is a YouTube series that takes a creative angle while also adding to the Slender Man mythology. Although in the Marble Hornets series, I believe they call him the Observer. They don't call him Slender Man directly. But Marble Hornets is very much in the spirit of your like found footage horror. Like a Blair Witch Project or that scene at the end of that Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. The story of Marble Hornets is, in 2006, a film student named Alex abandoned his project titled Marble Hornets in the middle of production. Alex swore that he would burn the footage and never speak a word about the project again. But Alex's friend Jay obtained the footage and kept it safe until years later when he finally begins reviewing it and digging in, maybe even trying to figure out why Alex abandoned this film in the first place. And upon review, Jay may have discovered that reason, but it also may be too late, as Jay's curiosity seems to have awakened the evil that forced Alex to abandon the project in the first place. Now, there's actually a lot to this series, including some live action, like high quality production stuff, all the stuff on YouTube. There's some comic book adaptations. They've got sequels, social media extensions. For instance, they even have supplemental YouTube and Twitter accounts that kind of play along, right, and feed into this story or this legend and have helped it grow. If you're interested in any of that, definitely check it out. Marble Hornets. It was pretty cool stuff to get into. It was really easy to waste a little bit of time during the research on that because it's not a massive part of the Slender Man story, but it was a really interesting one to me. Now, I don't bring this story up because it was interesting or because it even really provides us anything concrete. I bring this story up because it shows just how fast Slender Man blew up from that original posting, because this Marble Hornets thing that grew to something massive began just 10 days after the original posting. There's a new cryptid or monster created every single day in this internet world of creepypasta, like we talked about, but few to none of those creations have experienced that same kind of meteoric rise in popularity. Very few or none of them have carved out space in our collective consciousness as quickly as Slender Man has. And perhaps that's because he wasn't created on the internet. Maybe Eric's posting was just happened to align with something that has roots in history. Because you see, there are a handful of historical references to Slender Man, a Slender Man-like character at least, and all with varying degrees of validity, because this is the age of the internet. And again, the nature of how Slender Man was created and where it blew up on the creepypasta, fabricating the story. It is hard to a point to tell what is real and what is not. But for example, there were some cave paintings found in Brazil dating back as far as 9000 BC that show a strange, elongated figure leading a child by the hand. There are also a handful of instances of tall, human-like creatures in the folklore of several cultures, including the alleged German folktale of Der Grossman, which can be roughly translated to the tall man. Der Grossman is said to be a tall, thin fairy who lives in the Black Forest, which is a real place located in southern part of Germany. The story of Der Grossman was used by parents to scare their children into staying out of the forest, as well as just probably a general catch-all, as parents like to use fear, right, to deter children from certain things. They'd tell the kids that going into the forest without permission could prompt Der Grossman to pursue and torment the child until he either took them off to their unknown doom or conveniently until the child confessed to their parents. Parents also would warn their children that Der Grossman may come at night and tap on their window, taking them away once again to some unknown doom if they stayed up too late. So Der Grossman appears, if it's even true, to have been more of a cautionary tale used by parents than an evil entity that we know as Slender Man. But there are pretty strong similarities. There are a bunch of similar creatures and stories to Slender Man throughout history, but thanks to the time in which Slender Man was created, like I said, the age of the internet, there are just as many or more probably fake historical accounts that made researching this episode a little bit difficult. But Slender Man is not confined to just alleged old folk tales and popular creepypastas. In addition to the many, you'd be surprised how many alleged sightings of Slender Man have been reported in various tabloids, internet forums, and other air quotes news outlets. So those are people claiming to have seen Slender Man in real life. But in addition to those sightings, Slender Man has also been credited with modern-day real-world violence. A woman in Cincinnati, Ohio, claimed that her 13-year-old daughter attacked her with a knife because of or in the name of Slender Man. In Florida, a 14-year-old girl allegedly set her family's house on fire with her mother and 9-year-old brother still inside. And police reported that girl had been a frequent visitor to websites containing a lot of Slender Man creepypasta content. Another real-world Slender Man occurrence, one of the more interesting in my opinion, took place in early 2015 on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. The reservation was experiencing an epidemic of suicide attempts from people ages 12 to 24, and Slender Man was cited as an influence in this epidemic. The Olga Sioux tribe president actually noted that the Native Americans traditionally believe in a suicide spirit with striking similarities to the Slender Man. And other Sioux tribes speak of an entity called the Big Man, who is a messenger, and the Big Man's presence serves as a warning about the overall direction of society. So that those three examples right there, and hands down the most popular instance of Slender Man creating real-world violence, and one you may be surprised that I didn't bring up first when going into this portion of the show, the brutal stabbing that occurred in Waukesha, Wisconsin. On May 31st, 2014, two 12-year-old girls lured their friend into the forest before stabbing her 19 times. Unlike the other stories that we talked about and mentioned here briefly, this story has an abundance of facts and information available about the case and the incident available online. The stabbing occurred in Davids Park in Waukesha, Wisconsin. During a game of hide-and-seek, Anissa Weir and Morgan Geyser attacked their friend Peyton Leutner, all 12 years old. Anissa and Morgan pinned Peyton down to the ground and stabbed her 19 times in her arms, legs, and torso. Peyton suffered 2 wounds to her 2 major organs, but ultimately survived the attack. She was able to crawl to a nearby road where she was found by a cyclist who called 911. Anissa and Morgan were picked up near I-94, only 5 miles away from the area of the attack, and they were carrying the knife they used in the stabbing in the bag that they had with them. When Anissa and Morgan were picked up, they were on their way to Nicollet National Forest, which is where they believed Slender Man lived in his Slender Mansion. You see, Morgan believed that she and Anissa were to be proxies of Slender Man. She believed that Slender Man was giving them a choice. Either they killed Peyton and came to live in his mansion with him, or they watched as Slender Man killed both Morgan and Anissa's families, friends, and anyone that they cared about. When the girls were picked up, Morgan Geyser claimed to feel no empathy for the attack, and Anissa Weir was described as feeling extremely guilty, but ultimately agreeing that the attack felt necessary. Both girls were actually tried as adults and received long sentencing for the attack. Slender Man has both directly and indirectly inspired creepypastas, YouTube series, comic books, films, documentaries, video games, folktales, urban legends, and even real-world tragedies like that. And it's easy to discredit the existence of Slender Man by taking a trip through the internet, right? But it's undeniable that Slender Man has become something much more than just another creepy Photoshop. No matter where Slender Man started, he now holds a place in our minds and in the collective consciousness. And as scary as the many stories posted online can be, the real world effects of Slender Man are equally, if not more, terrifying. Because as fake as he may be to you or me, try telling that to the people living on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, or to the mother whose house was set on fire, or to the parents of Peyton Leutner. Unfortunately, for many people, Slender Man has become all too real. And that is going to do it for today's episode. Something a little different from our normal episode structure, from the normal episode subject matter. I really hope that you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please, a rating and review on Apple Podcasts would be amazing. It means a lot, helps a ton. You can always email the show with feedback and anything else you got, downwiththestrangeness@gmail.com. If you're watching or listening on YouTube right now, a like and comment help out a lot, and make sure you subscribe to the channel. There's good visual stuff for every episode on the YouTube channel. I do try to put some or as many kind of visual enhancements to the episode as I can in those videos. So definitely check that out if you haven't. We will be back with another scary, spooky, creepy kind of story as we get another week deeper into October next week. I hope you're all enjoying the spooky season. Remember to follow the podcast on all your favorite social medias. Do all that cool podcast stuff like rate, subscribe, whatever. And check out our brand new website. One thing I can't believe I didn't say earlier in the show, finally got the website, official website up and running, downwiththestrangeness.com. Links to everything are in the show notes. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode on Slender Man. We will be back with more strangeness next week. I've been your host, Ben. I'll catch you guys on the next one. And until then, keep it strange.